United States of Horror may contain some graphic or explicit content that is not suitable for all ages. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello.
Hello. Good.
Oh, you were recording?
Yeah.
Oh,
You had to give him a sign.
No,
great.
it's better whenever you don't know.
Okay, no. So we're still recording?
Yeah, it's
okay,
still
that's
going.
great. This is Brenton then.
I'm Jeff,
Hi, my name is Kaylee.
and over there is Shauna, so
Our
You-
guest for today.
Hello. You might hear her occasionally,
one of us gasp.
maybe. So the three of us, how we know each other is it's a really long. No, it's not a long story.
No, not at all.
Jeff and I are dating,
Yes.
and Brenton is
And we are
married.
Awesome.
well, technically,
I'm married to his sister.
yes.
Sort
We live in Prescott, Arizona,
of.
and technically Paladin, Chino Valley.
Nobody ever knows what Chino is.
That's why you had to get it on the map with this. And be like, oh, Prescott, I know that name.
Northern Arizona is
There
like, it's a wide range, but it.
The place you stop to get gas when you're going from Flagstaff to Prescott. That's Chino.
An alternate route to the Grand Canyon.
He is.
Yeah.
But
Well, welcome to the podcast.
anyway, I can cut whatever too.
That's fine.
You can cut whatever. Cut me out, please.
You don't need any of my stuff. You could just cut that whole bit out.
Shut up.
Okay. Yeah. What
So,
what do you
yeah.
want to do? Tell us what you want to do with this.
Well, the three of us are rather interested in true crime and conspiracy theories, paranormal. So we wanted to kind of share that interest with everybody else, whoever decides to listen. Hopefully it's more than just my mom.
I'm not listening to it. That's all I know.
I've been telling all three of my friends about it.
You have friends?
Wait,
They're
we're
right
your
here.
friends? Who's the third one?
Abby.
Oh, your own daughter.
All she's gonna know is our voices, so
Talking
Yeah, that'll
about.
be fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
that's great.
This is fine.
So what do we have lined up for today?
So for the first episode, I figured we could talk about something kind of close to home. It's a murder that used to be really well known, but kind of was lost in history. It was kind of an embarrassment for Arizona. It turned into an embarrassment for Arizona. So there was a lot of cover up, and I think that they just wanted everybody to forget. So we're going to talk about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is it so?
You're going to get edited out so much.
Yeah.
I cannot wait. It's going to be awesome.
Like, that was stupid, Jeff.
It'll be the whole podcast, and all we have is, hi, I'm Jeff. That's it.
I want to be that one guy in that.
There's going to be random bits of silence where he said something stupid.
Oh, boy.
So anytime there's a gap or a skip in between, then you know.
Because I like to skip. I don't know.
It's stuff like that.
There's going to
Okay.
be one right there.
Oh, I need to go lay down. Tell me about some murder, please, or something. Some
I'm
horror.
already crying. This is great.
So, a story.
Okay, so there's a lot to this, and for it all to make sense, you kind of have to have a lot of the background.
Okay.
So there's going to be a little bit of build-up before we get into what actually happened,
Okay.
but it's all necessary, and you'll see it all kind of tie in together. So if it doesn't make sense, just bear with me. It's all going to make sense in the end. First of all, my mom is the one who actually told me about this case. She got this book. It's called The Trunk Murderess, Winnie Ruth Judd. It's by Jana Bombersnatch. Yep.
Shauna.
Bombersback. Oh, sure. Bombersback? Yeah. Okay.
Hammer smack. Smack.
She actually met Winnie Ruth Judd, and a lot of her book is based off of the interviews between her and Winnie. And it's pretty accurate. If you go to Wikipedia, they tell a very one-sided version, and we'll get into that too. So it's kind of hard to find accurate information because a lot of what was reported in media just wasn't 100%. So anyway, Winnie Ruth Judd was born January 29th, 1905, to Reverend H.J. McKinnell, a Methodist minister, and his wife Carrie in Oxford, Indiana. She was very close with her parents. They grew up in church. She grew up in church. Her childhood was very sheltered. She wasn't allowed to go to any circuses, carnivals, ball games, the movies, skating rinks. I mean, she was basically at home, school, and church.
Step one of something going wrong.
I guess. So she left home at the age of 17 and married Dr. William C. Judd, who was 22 years older than her. So right off the bat, she was out of high school into a marriage with an older man who happened to be addicted to morphine.
Oh, that's lovely.
So it obviously made it hard for him to hold down a job. They moved around a lot. They had unstable finances. So their marriage was already a little bit rocky. According to Ruth, the doctor was very kind, and I think that their love was true, but she was kind of stuck making a hard decision later on. Their marriage was also further strained by Ruth's tuberculosis. So she was very weak, very sick. That also left her unable to bear children. So she had 2 miscarriages. That was, really hard on her. She'd always wanted to be a mother. It kind of left a hole in her life, and she would often pretend that she had the children.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of instability there. But anyway, in 1930, her husband had been living in Mexico, working there off and on as much as he could, but not making very much money. Ruth's health was not in the best shape, so she made the decision to move to Phoenix, Arizona, which promised, the warmer, drier weather that was supposed to be really good for tuberculosis patients. So she took off. She moved to Phoenix, Arizona. She didn't really have any skills, or she didn't know anybody that could help her earn a living. But despite that, she was able to find a job working for a wealthy family, watching their children, kind of being like an in-home nanny, that sort of thing. This is important because that's where she first meets Jack Halloran, or Happy Jack. So we'll go back to him. But after that, she was able to find a better job, working 6 days a week at Phoenix's first private medical clinic, the Grinnell Clinic, making $75 a month, which is pretty good for back then, a woman on her own, to make that kind of money.
Yeah, 6 days a week.
So, yeah, she was able to afford her own place, food, and then occasionally she could send money to the good doctor, who was still trying to find solid work. So at this clinic, she befriended Anne Leroy. She was an x-ray technician, and she had a roommate, Sammy Samuelson, and they would spend a lot of their free time together. They were known as the girls. They lived together at one point, but they had some differences, and so Ruth moved out of their little place and back into her own place. So all 3 were independent single women back in the 1930s, where it wasn't common for women to not have some sort of caretaker. And that's important because often, due to their health, they couldn't go out, they couldn't go dancing, they couldn't do all that stuff, so they entertain at home. One of the people that would come over often was Jack Halloran. Happy Jack, who Ruth ended up having an affair with.
Ooh, snap.
Yeah. So they'd been together for about 10 months, seeing each other secretly. And one night, he was supposed to come over to Ruth's, but it was about 9:30 at night. Ruth said, "Enough's enough. I'm done waiting for you. She had originally stood the girls up. She was supposed to meet them to play bridge and eat dinner and stuff they normally did. So she decided to leave. She was like, if he's going to come, then he's going to show up, and I'm not going to be here because I'm not going to sit around and wait for him. So she left her place, went to their house. Unfortunate for her, it was a decision that changed a lot of people's lives. She would have been better off just staying home, but that's not what happened. There's a lot of theories that kind of surround what happened that night. But before I talk about exactly what happened, I'm going to talk about the Sunday afterwards. That was October 16th, 1931, that she went over to the girl's house. And then the Sunday was October 18th. So early that morning, she went to her landlord's. She asked him to help her move some trunks. She, I guess, appeared anxious. She had a bandaged hand, which she said she burnt earlier. She told her landlord that she had to take some of her husband's medical books to California, and then she couldn't move the trunks. So the landlord went to move the trunks, realized he couldn't do it on his own either. He had his son come in, help him pick them up, loaded them into their car, drove her to the train station, and Ruth was on her way with 2 steamer trunks, a beaten-up suitcase, and an old hat box to California to meet up with her husband and brother. So during the trip, there was a baggage man who noticed 2 major things right off the bat. First and foremost was the smell coming from the trunks, which was pretty noticeable right off the bat. And then the second was a strange liquid leaking from them.
No wonder.
So he assumed that it was illegal deer meat being smuggled, because that's something that they've seen in the past. Your mind isn't going to go much further than that, hopefully.
It's not melted ice cream, that's for sure.
No, or it was Prohibition was going on, so they're thinking maybe like a broken bottle of booze, something like that. Mm-hmm. So Monday morning, Ruth arrived in Los Angeles and waited for her brother to pick her up. And she waited and waited and waited, and eventually she had to go retrieve her brother, and she left her bags behind. Obviously, they were very heavy. She couldn't take them with her. So she returned with her brother, and when she went to retrieve her trunks, they started questioning her. Do you not smell that? Like, what does that smell? What is possibly in these trunks that could cause a smell like that? Ruth basically said she didn't know. She had no idea what could have been causing the leaking, what was making them smell. And when they asked her to unlock them, she couldn't find the key. And conveniently, her husband had it. She told them that she would have to go get her husband and go get the key, and then that she would be right back. So on their way out, the brother is obviously questioning her. He has no idea what's going on. Like, hey sis, what's up? What's in those trunks? What was that smell? Why is there blood coming out of the trunks? Because they did discover that it was blood when they brought it out in the daylight and all that fun stuff. Ruth basically said, it's better if you don't know, and in fact, just let me out here and go on your merry way.
Wow.
So she's dropped off in the middle of Los Angeles. Meanwhile, back at the train station, they say, no, we're not waiting. That smell is way too offensive. It's one of 2 things. It's either deer meat or something else. So they call the police. The police come, they pick the locks, and the officer moves aside a piece of rug that's at the very top. Saw some books and papers, some women's clothing smeared with blood, and all of that stuff was piled on top of a homemade quilt. And when the officer lifted the corner of the quilt, staring back at him was a woman. It was the body of Anne, Ruth's best friend in the whole world. She was on her side, her head in one corner, her knees drawn up to her chest, sitting in the largest trunk. So there's body number 1.
Wow.
Obviously, that caused a further investigation of the trunks. They opened up her smaller trunk, and under several sheets of paper and a light cotton blanket were 2 bundles wrapped in women's clothing. Also was, there's blood in that one as well. So they opened it up, and the first was a human foot and leg from the knee down.
Wow.
And the second was a torso of a woman from the head to the navel.
Wow.
Yeah, they found her torso and one of her legs in the smaller trunk. And then her upper legs were found in a small suitcase and a hat box that Ruth, she'd left it earlier in the lady's room with an employee. So obviously the police confiscated the trunks.
Yeah.
And they were now looking for Winnie Ruth Judd. So the press back then, there wasn't really anybody checking facts. Basically what was reported, everybody took for truth.
Especially if the media or the cop or someone authoritative.
And yeah, so it was very quickly sensationalized. Ruth was hiding out until she made a call to her husband, and she finally decided to surrender to the police at a funeral home the following Friday. So she was hiding out for about a week before she surrendered on Friday, October 23rd. By that time, media had covered pretty much, they knew all her background. They made a lot of assumptions about the case. They said that the body was hacked into pieces, when in fact it was cleanly cut into several sections. So they were calling her the Tiger Woman or the Blonde Butcher. Eventually they called them the Trunk Murders. Which that's basically throughout the trial what they would call it. So basically from the beginning, Ruth was pretty much hanged because they did nothing to secure the girls' bungalow back in Arizona. So tons of evidence was confiscated, basically. They let people track through the crime scene.
Wow.
Like I said, they did absolutely nothing to...
Tape off.
Yeah, they didn't tape it off. It wasn't like it is now where, they have the yellow tape, nobody goes in or out, nothing is moved, nothing is touched. People were in there picking up letters, going through drawers, looking at all the blood. I mean, by the time that she went to trial, everything was pretty much already...
Yeah, and this was back then. They had no way to test for a lot of things, so...
Yeah, exactly.
You needed those physical evidence back then.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the way that it went was basically they're trying to say that this 100-pound sickly woman not only shot and killed the two girls in their sleep, but she cut up Sammy's body herself, loaded the trunks herself, and moved the trunks herself as well. And it went all the way through the trial, and that's what they pressed. And unfortunately, Ruth's lawyers were they just didn't do their job. She wanted to testify. She wanted to go on stand and tell them the truth. She was never allowed to tell what happened. She was never allowed to testify at all. A lot of the evidence, like I said, was either tampered with or just gone in general. And so there was nothing to support what she said happened, which we'll also talk about, versus what they were trying to say. Some of the both mattresses in the home were gone. So there's no way to say for sure that, hey, no, there was no bullets in these mattresses, or, no, there was no blood in here. So she had barely a fighting chance. And unfortunately for her, it was brought up that there was an argument about Happy Jack. He was a political figure. He's very well known. And for him, it would be very damning for anybody to know that he was hanging out with Ruth or the girls at all, because they were single women.
One was technically married, so you don't want that.
Yeah, Ruth was supposed to be married, but everybody pretty much knew the trio and what they were about, and there were a lot of single men that went through their house and partied with them and whatever else was happening.
Yeah,
so
use your imagination.
Basically. So it would be very damning for him because he was in politics, and this was already a very high-profile case. So at first he was sworn in as a witness, or, as someone who could be called, but they never called on him at all. So, okay.
So wait. He was just a witness, but they never called on him, but they never looked at maybe him as a possibility? I mean, okay.
Well, there are people who can basically put him there, but...
He has no motive?
No, there is a motive. Okay. But the people who can put them there were never called to stand or were never asked specifically that question. And back in that time, if the investigation was done by the prosecutors, and they didn't have to share their evidence at all with the defendant.
Yeah, they have to just share it with the jury or the judge or whoever was trying.
Yeah, so if they found something that would have been helpful to the defense, unless the defense knew for sure there was a police report on it, they couldn't call for it or ask to see it or anything. So they had no idea. It was very different.
Back then than it is now.
Yeah. And Jack was a powerful guy with powerful influences,
Yeah.
and she basically, like I said, she didn't have a fighting chance. So the trial goes through. They're saying, she shot them in their sleep, killed them, did all this, but it's not adding up. Like, she's sick. She has tuberculosis. She's only 100 pounds. She's very weak. She couldn't even get the trunks onto the train. She had to have help. And yet, somehow, she was still convicted for the murders. And she was sentenced to death. But they were able to commute the sentence and get her...
Serve her life in prison?
Well, no, she was... or she pleaded insanity is what happened.
Okay.
So she was taken to the state hospital. And that's a lot, too. But basically what happened that night, from what she has said and from her testimony, is she showed up. The girls were already in bed. They had been playing bridge with another girl that night, but she left. The girls were a little concerned because Ruth had introduced Jack to this girl who had syphilis. So back then, that was a big taboo thing as well, because there was no cure. There's only things to make it better.
Yeah.
But it was basically incurable, and it was like having leprosy in the Bible days. You were looked down upon, you were outcast. But Ruth introduced her to Jack because she hunted up north, and he was going on a hunting trip. And so it was not...
In an ill way?
It wasn't meant to take Jack away from the girls. The girls liked him a lot because he had money, and he doted on them. He'd buy them food. They bought them a radio, a brand new radio, which is a big deal. They were girls on their own, and they had someone who was throwing in a chip or two every now and then. Well, basically, it was like, a 1930s sugar daddy.
Renton knows it's like, I'm a sugar daddy. That's true.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, Happy Jack went north.
So they got in a huge argument between the three of them over Happy Jack, in which Ruth claims Anne went to go get a gun from her room. She retrieved the gun and threatened her. Ruth, in self-defense, grabbed for the gun, was shot in the hand, grabbed a knife from the table, and started to stab Anne to get her off of her. And then after she was able to get the gun from Anne, shot her in the head.
Wow.
I think she shot her several times. And then Sammy, in the meantime, was trying to beat her to death.
Beat her?
With an ironing board. So she was swinging at Ruth, trying to hit Ruth, trying to get Ruth off of Anne while this scuffle was happening. And when Ruth came to, she turned around and shot Sammy in the head as well.
So this is from her testimony?
This is what came out later on. Yes, this is her when she was finally able to speak. This is what she was telling. Which there was also a letter that they found washed down a drain pipe back in California, where Ruth admits to the murders. It's a letter written to her husband. She had planned to commit suicide, so she wrote her confession to her husband and apologized for packing things as she had to. And she states in the letter that she killed in self-defense. So it's something that, she stood by. It makes sense. She had the bullet wound in her hand, which obviously the prosecutors just said, well, you shot yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's just a conspiracy in a way, because I could see how that happens too, but she kept shooting and...
Well, yeah, I think the first couple missed, and then...
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I might be saying it backwards, but I'm pretty sure she shot her through her arm, and then fatally shot her after that. So
Okay.
she never denied killing them.
But
she said that she killed in self-defense.
Okay.
And there's actually pictures in the book of her with bruises all over her arms. And
Wow. Back then, I don't think they would think it's okay to defend yourself like that, especially in that state of mind.
Well, self-defense would have, if they had ruled in her favor, if her attorneys had gone with that angle, if they had pushed it, if they had shown all the evidence, if they were able to pull the witnesses that they needed to, she would have been acquitted. She would have been let go.
Really?
Yeah.
Even though she self-defense?
Yep. She would have been let go because it was self-defense.
But why stuff them all in a trunk?
So
Where's the beds?
that's where things get tricky. So Jack, obviously, he was supposed to meet up with Ruth that night. He went to her place. She wasn't there. That was her plan. He assumed that she had to have gone over to the girl's house. So he ended up showing up after this had all happened.
Okay.
He finds her hysterical, freaking out, and he says, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of it. You go home." So that's the end of it for Ruth. She's like, that's all that I know. I know that he kept trying to call Dr. Brown. He wasn't answering. There was actually a bloody fingerprint on the window shade that matched what she was trying to say, but someone had cut it out.
Mm.
So, I mean, from the beginning, the whole case was centered around protecting Jack rather than proving her innocence or proving the case for what it was. So that's why I believe what she comes out to say, because it makes sense. Here's this prominent man. He doesn't want his image, his life to be destroyed. And there's this woman who they could peg everything on and call it good. So yeah, she says that Jack showed up. She went home. He basically tells her, "I'm going to have it taken care of. Don't worry. I'm going to have these trunks delivered to you. You're going to take them to California and dump them in the ocean." So she put her whole faith into him. You know, she from the get-go, she wanted to go to the police from the start and tell them what happened. And I think that, I'm not sure why, that part kind of has me questioning, is like, why would he not just let her call the police? You know what I mean? And it would have been squared away then. Who knows?
So, I still have questions though about it.
Okay.
Like, you know how to say, some people are saying, like the news are saying, she just chopped up the bodies, right?
Yeah.
But there's some people are saying that they're clean cut, like they knew where to do it.
Yeah, and that was a big argument too, because there was no way that Ruth would have the skill to cut them as they were. They were clean cut from, it was head to torso, so she's cut at the navel. And then it was basically her waist down to her knees, and then her knees down were also in pieces. So
her husband, a doctor,
mm-hmm.
what kind of doctor was he? Does anyone know?
Well, that was actually a theory too. They
Really?
were trying to say that maybe the doctor came into town, helped her out, went back out to California. But surprising enough, good old Dr. Brown, he was reported or seen at the jail when he was being held. He showed up drunk as a skunk, saying, "I know what happened that night. I'm the only one who knows what happened that night." So Dr. Brown told Ruth that he was going to confess everything, confess to cutting up Sammy's body. He went to the attorney and he said, "I want to tell the whole story." He made an appointment for the next week to confess everything to this attorney and tell him absolutely everything.
Wow, okay.
And then the day before that appointment, he died.
Wait, what do you mean he died?
He died.
How did he die?
They said that it was a heart attack. But whenever they looked into it, there was no formal investigation. There was no...
he died. He's old.
He was pronounced dead from a heart attack, and that was that. So she has people that they were going to back her up, but somehow mysteriously...
Air quoting here. We're all air quoting.
Yeah, mysteriously, so mysterious. He passed away.
No one thought that was inconspicuous at all.
Or they didn't call, very specific witnesses, like I said, that would have would have helped get her out.
Yeah.
So that's the real story, is that she went over. They got into an argument. A gun was pulled on her. She was shot through the hand trying to get the gun away. She turned around, fired on Anne, killed her. Sammy was beating her. She turned on Sammy, killed her, and then was met by Happy Jack, who sent her home. He promised her that he would take care of everything.
Just deliver it to the ocean.
It got to the point where she was there. So the killings happened Friday night, and the trunks were sitting in her apartment from Friday to Sunday, when she finally was like, okay, he's not coming for me. He's not helping me. I got to figure this out on my own. And that's whenever she took off.
That's why I started smelling right away.
Yeah, so
2-3 days.
She originally, like I said, she was sentenced to hang pretty much days before she was supposed to hang. They finally were able to get an insanity plea. She spent 30 years in the insane asylum. So she spent more time in the insane asylum than she would have spent in jail for the murders. Had she been tried correctly.
Only like, 25, 26 years?
It was between, I think they said 8, or I think they could have served 1 to 10 years back then for first degree.
Back
then? Yeah.
What a good time to be alive to murder someone. You should have the purge back then.
Lifespans weren't as big back then.
Yeah.
People born in the 1930s or something, that's only, 70, 80 something years ago now?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Well,
40s?
Almost
1930.
90, so almost 90 years ago.
Yeah, there you go.
Life from there, so.
Yeah.
I think that was the change of lifespan there.
Yeah.
That's
So yeah, she ended up being a huge blessing to the insane asylum. Actually, it was very understaffed
she was
back
a nurse,
then.
Right?
Oh, she was actually just a receptionist, but she'd been around it. She'd helped with Sammy.
Yeah.
Because Sammy was in very poor health.
But she was good with hair. She did everybody's
Yeah, because she was poor, the one thing that she had was her hair. And so she would always cut her own hair, and that's how she learned. And so she actually ended up opening her own hair salon in the insane asylum, and she would do all the prisoners' hair. Not prisoners, but all the...
Inmates, or what do you call them?
Patients. There's a word for it. All the patient hair, and eventually she even did people's hair that just like random people off the street would come in and get their hair cut by her. So
start from the bottom. Now we're here.
Oh my gosh. Another bout of silence.
No, I was just wondering because I know that there was a place called Happy Jack, Arizona. I wasn't sure if that was
relatable.
Well,
considering he was a politician.
He kind of got his in the end because of what happened and his involvement, despite him never being properly investigated or convicted or anything else. All the attention that he got from the case really damned his reputation. So
by association, probably.
Pretty much. He had owned a business, or partly owned a business, and
the lumber.
Yeah, he owned a lumber mill, and basically he fired, or did they just cut him off from the rest of the business? And he did his own thing.
Ended up going under.
That's right. Yeah, so his portion of the lumber business went under.
I was just about to say maybe Happy Jack wasn't related to that, but it says that Happy Jack may have been named for a cheerful local lumberman.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh.
I was like, well, that's not the same thing then, but if he was part of a lumbering business...
Oh, yeah, possibly. That's very possible.
Something to look into there.
Yeah.
Because there's a Happy Jack, Arizona.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
It's creepy.
Maybe that's where he went in hiding at.
So
I know.
So she's cutting hair now. And you said she was in there for 30 years?
Yeah, so for 30 years, and throughout the 30 years, she would often escape.
Wait, escape? Like, what do you mean escape?
So,
like escape the bathroom?
Escape? No, escape the whole place, Jeffrey. Well, yeah, she went outside of the bathroom.
She escaped multiple times? And she got... Obviously, she escaped, but like... Where'd she go?
Why stayed in a different room?
Home.
Did they bring her back?
Yeah, if she escaped several times, she had to be brought back.
No.
In order to escape again.
You guys don't understand.
I think what he's trying to say is, like, did she eventually, like, finish her life out there?
Or, like, if she escaped, why put her back there in the same place? It makes no sense.
They couldn't figure out how she was escaping.
They didn't know how.
Okay.
So the very first time she escaped, her father died sadly, and then her mother was actually admitted to the same hospital because it wasn't just an insane asylum. They also,
Hospice?
it was basically like, I hate to say it, but it was like a dumping grounds for people with mental illnesses, physical illnesses, older people who were just unable to care for themselves or senile.
And that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
Those places were horrible back then.
Yeah. And like I said, Ruth was helping a lot. She wasn't just cutting hair. She was also taking care of people. It was said that she did the job of 2 to 3 nurses. So she found a purpose there. And she was able to take care of some of the kids too, which she'd always wanted to be a mother. So it was kind of like she became a mom after all.
Yeah.
But anyway, her mom was eventually admitted to the hospital because she was old. She didn't have her husband anymore. She didn't have anybody take care of her. And so Ruth escaped out her window. She was able to spend a lot of time with her, and she eventually tied old rags together and escaped down the window. It was like a 3-story building that she climbed down. That was one time, and then another time she went through the window of the bathroom. She would cut the screen little bits at a time, and then she would chew gum and put the screen back with the chewing gum so that nobody noticed. And then one day she said she had a headache, had to take a bath, went to the bathroom, and when she didn't reappear, they went to check on her, and she was gone. So that was just 2 of the times, and then eventually she revealed that one of the nurse staff had given her a key to the front door.
Oh.
So she was literally just waltzing out the front door. But you have to think, this poor woman, she was stuck in an insane asylum. She was totally and completely sane. She was 100% competent. She was being treated like an insane person. She was also having to see these poor people being mistreated. She kept getting promised that, we're going to do something for you. We're going to get you out. We're going to
do a retrial or anything or something.
Exactly. And that never happened. The forces at hand were basically bent on, they were going to keep her there no matter what. Because who's going to trust the testimony of a crazy person?
Yep.
Basically, there was a lot. There was a higher power keeping her there, and nothing fair or good was going to happen for her.
And, probably a nurse probably saw her helping out so much.
Yeah.
Probably even think about it. It was like, I guess if she's doing all this, might as well just trust her.
So, she took matters into her own hands, and a lot of the staff knew that she was innocent at this point. I think she was about 70 whenever she escaped. It was the last time she escaped, and the first few times she was out for maybe a few hours. There was a time it lasted, I think, a couple days. But the very last time she escaped, she had escaped for 6 years.
So she was free that time.
Yeah, what she did was she had her nephew waiting with a car. She hid out for a couple days to kind of, let things die down. This was years later. This was in the 60s. So 30 years after the case.
Yeah.
Nobody really knew her name anymore. It wasn't as sensationalized.
It was probably just a local story. So the best way to get away from that is probably move to a different state.
Yeah, so she went to California.
Of course, back to California. Where
her brother was, and her nieces and nephews. Her husband had passed away as well, so that's all she had left, the only family she had left. And she ended up finding a job out there, actually, and working for 6 years, changed her name, and lived for 6 years, out in California, living in a mansion, taking care of a very wealthy family.
Like a nanny again.
Yeah, basically.
So, all she wanted to do is take care of other people.
Yeah, so if anything else, it proved that she could live out in society. She was not a threat. She was totally and completely competent.
Well, there's 2 sides of a coin, I guess.
Well, yeah, but
from what?
Well, you have to think about Ted Bundy. He escaped
multiple times.
And every time he escaped, he killed people again.
Yeah.
But to everybody that she knew, she was the kindest person they knew. She did everything for everyone. She just didn't have a mean bone in her body. So there was a lot of theory, too, that she never even pulled the trigger. With how young and impressionable and just hysterical she was back then, they're wondering if maybe Jack Halloran or whoever else was involved convinced her that she had done it. So there's a lot of speculation there, too. But she did get caught eventually after, I think she spent another year in prison. They convinced them finally that she was sane. She had a sanity hearing, and they concluded that she was sane, and she went to jail for about another year, and finally, she was totally acquitted, and she was let go because she had spent almost 40 years
in some sort of,
which they argued, that's 3 times what anybody would have served,
especially back then.
Back then.
Well, then again, if she did murder like 2 or 3 people.
But even if you say that, then she still had 10 years.
A couple times. Like, I can see both sides of the coin. Like, if she escaped a couple times and did all this, I can see how people are like, oh yeah, she's guilty. But I can also see the other side where she just wanted to live her life and be helpful and just be innocent.
But you have to think, if she'd been given a fair trial and everything was presented as it was, she would have been acquitted and never served any time at all.
Yeah.
Seems like she was just bullied by people.
Yeah, she was.
Like, especially by a politician and some judge. They could have been friends and they could just pin it on her.
Yeah. So, like in the end, she was given her freedom. She was on parole for a while. She was a parolee for a while, but then she was kind of able to live her life, totally free.
Like 80.
Yeah. So she was a lot older, but she lived out the rest of her life basically
how long she
on the opposite spectrum of where she was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So
how old she was when she died? 93.
Yeah, and that was
93.
That was the argument too.
93.
93. Wow.
Yeah, she lived to 93. So she ended up living, I think, 10, 20 years later.
Okay.
After she got out, but
she spent most of her life for controversial. So, but is there any update at all nowadays?
I mean, there's not much that they could do because of how much evidence was destroyed or misplaced or just
how no one's left really alive in that time.
But any investigator, officer, attorney, anybody who's ever looked over the case again, they've been able to see the bigger picture and see how much corruption was in there. And one of the attorneys who looked over the case said that if all the evidence that they had been brought forth, and all the testimonies and all the people who could place her at certain points and confirm that her story was true, if they had all testified, she would have been acquitted. Because there are people who can place her on the train after she left the girl's house. There are people who can say that they heard a vehicle approach her house. She didn't have a car. So
she had to walk everywhere.
Yeah, and so her neighbor, who slept very light, she testified that she heard a car approach her house.
Well, did she hear the gunshots?
Or she didn't testify, she told police. No, and that's the thing. They're saying that Ruth had shot her own hand in her apartment.
So why would you shoot over there and shoot your own hand unless she's trying to cover it up for herself?
Well, that's the thing, is they thought maybe she was trying to hide something.
Yeah, but that one neighbor, she never heard any gunshots.
No. And then there are people who could also identify Jack's car as being there the night of the murder, but they also weren't called to the witness stand. So,
weren't they also charging or letting people go through the house, and they were charging them 10 cents, and they could just walk through the house? And see
They opened up the house. This is while the trial was going on, basically, where people could just walk through and look, and it wasn't very well supervised. So I mean, people could have been taking stuff, and that was important.
Souvenirs. I'll keep this for later.
Yeah. And this guy, as if he didn't damn her well enough. Whenever she was in the insane asylum, they would have dances, and he would go to the insane asylum and stand in there and laugh at her and mock her.
Wow.
And send her into hysterics and stuff like that. So he was just a horrible person in general. There's no doubt in my mind that he didn't do it.
Why not through the trial? He was at nighttime. He'd be drinking at the bars with the judges and attorneys, and
so he had friends in high places. He knew a lot of people, and he just wasn't worried because he
could have been a cover up just for him and just blame her.
It could have been, and that's why people came out and they said, it's hard for us to even believe that this fragile little person even pulled the trigger.
There's so many questions.
Yeah, and you have to see the pictures. I know it's a little gruesome, but you have to see how clean these cuts were.
Sorry. So see the pictures, see how gruesome they were. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it like,
well,
you can see.
That's a slash right there?
So that was one of the arguments, too, is they thought it was someone who was untrained because they started to cut at the hip bone. But a doctor looked at the pictures, and he said that you can detach the legs from the hips, but you need a thin, long blade, and it's a little bit harder. So it looks like they started to do that and then decided either it was going to take too long or it just wasn't a possibility because of their tools. So you can see they're clean cuts. It wasn't done messily. She's not hacked to bits, as they said in media.
Well, technically, I guess it could look like that back then. But nowadays, we have more science and tools to actually determine that. Back then, it just looks like a meat, cleaver. But
you can see in this picture, they were able to stitch her back together.
Yeah.
So there wasn't any missing flesh. It's not like it was done poorly. It was done clean.
And if anybody listening wants to see the pictures, they can
go to Murderpedia.
Murderpedia.org.
Should we get a link and?
Yeah, I could probably link it. Yeah. I mean, it's black and white, so you don't get the full effect.
But it could be pretty graphic.
But it is very graphic. It's body parts.
So you can see where they could fit inside the actual case and what was in there and stuff.
It's pretty gnarly.
Wow. A little pinky toe.
Viewer discretion, it is advised.
They should visually see these pictures.
Visually see them?
Shut up, Jeff.
Everyone from here and listening about it and then
it's
seeing
it.
It's
going to be our catchphrase. We watch. Shirts.
It's on shirts.
Shut up, Jeff. Yeah, I found something interesting, too. In Florence, Arizona, in a museum, they have a doll that Winnie actually made while she was in the asylum.
Yeah. That's another thing, too. She was in the prison for a while. That's something that the judge who was supposed to be deciding whether she did any more time or not when she was captured the final time, his argument was she never really served any hard time, that when she was in the jail in Florence, she was able to have kittens. She was just treated very well. I mean, she obviously, whenever she would escape from the asylums, she'd be put in solitary confinement. I think she spent 2 years in solitary confinement at one point, and they'd bang her around, and it's not exactly easy to live in an insane asylum. But he just argued because she had or allowed to do certain things that not everyone was, they tried to argue that she never really served any time. But, she wasn't able to be at her father's side when he passed away. Her husband passed away, too. She missed a lot of time with people that she could have otherwise been free for something that she physically couldn't have done on her own. There's no way. So, yeah, that's the case of Winnie Ruth Judd.
So, what do you guys think? Do you guys think she's innocent? Do you guys think she's
I just think she's impressionable.
Yeah, and that's my thing, too. She was impressionable. She's young and naive.
I'm on the other side of the spectrum.
Because there could have been jealousy involved if he was helping to take care of the other girls, too.
Yeah, and that's what people say, and that's why it was so easy for everyone to believe it was some crazed, jealous girlfriend who couldn't handle that her
friends are getting more attention now.
Yeah, her lover was giving her.
They could have threatened to tell her husband about it.
So she killed them, and then she had her husband chop up the bodies, and then Jack found out and said, "No, you're going away, and I'm making sure I have the power to make sure you go away." So there's always,
I can't wait till time travel becomes a thing. All mysteries uncovered.
Yeah.
You guys tell me to shut up now. Look at you.
Shut up, Jeff.
Dang it.
Well, that was a valid comment.
Because one day when time travel becomes real, we can go back and just witness what happened.
Wait, time travel is real, don't you know?
God,
we can talk about that on another episode.
Yeah, we'll do that later. Let's not.
YouTube.
Do we have an email or anything like that people can send us their stories? Or?
Yeah, so we have a Twitter, which I'll probably go on and post some pictures of Winnie and Winnie Ruth Judd
Maybe some of the trunks and stuff. And
how old am I that I went to email before I went to Twitter or Facebook?
Well, we do have an email too. So our email, let me just double check.
24. I should have known better.
What is this, like, Instagram, y'all? It's hip.
See, shut up, Jeff.
Okay, so if you have stories or if you have topics or anything else that you want to hear us talk about, you can email us. It's unitedstatesofhorror@gmail.com. Or we do have a Twitter. It's just the United States of Horror.
That's awesome. Anyway, yeah, so if you guys have any stories, let us know. Subscribe. We'll be definitely posting more better content for you guys.
Yeah. Our social media accounts aren't super active right now, but I'll leave a link in the description so that we can, get everyone in the loop. We can post our pictures and you can see the pictures to the
the story.
Yeah.
Anxiety.
Overall, I think it was a great story, a great way to start out for us. And,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Close to home for us.
Judd's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So our own.
Shauna's back.
More than just murder, also content.
And thank you for our guest today, Shauna. She was pretty quiet.
She had 4 words.
Thanks for your commentary.
It was nice listening.
This was recorded in front of a live studio audience.
Of 2 people?
Of one person.
One audience member.
And the puppy.
Yeah.
Puppy's outside.
So we'll hopefully have more episodes coming out. Yeah, we will have more episodes coming out soon. We're going to try and do it weekly.
If you have any stories, share them. If you want to look over everything, tell a story from your state, or just,
Yeah, if you have suggestions, definitely send them in.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, it's Kaylee. I wanted to pop in real quick before the end of the episode and correct a couple things. So our Twitter handle is @US_of_horror, and we do have an Instagram page. It's just @UnitedStatesOfHorror. And then, of course, the email is unitedstatesofhorror@gmail.com. So get in touch with us. Let us know what you thought of our first episode, and we'll be posting about Winnie Ruth Judd and posting a couple pictures, so go on there and, start a conversation. Let us know your thoughts on the story. Thanks again. Have a great week, and we'll see you again soon.